What's your opinion about the politic of Angela Merkel in the European economic crisis?
The crisis management, which is led by Angela Merkel and Nicolas Sarkozy, does not really solve the crisis, but in many aspects deepens the crisis and will lead to a higher cost for taxpayer than necessary, and also to an uneven distribution of the burden of this crisis.
Do you think Angela Merkel or the CDU politic helps or harms, goes against countries like Greece, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Spain?
I don't think it actually goes against the countries you name, but the approach is looking first at the national interest, which is also true for other heads of government or heads of state in Europe. The problem is, in a crisis of that kind, in a currency union, you need to go it together. It's a European crisis and we need a European solution for that. And the fact that each of the crisis summits in Brussels is again a quarreling between the heads of states, and each government tries to make the best for its own country, that brings about a higher cost of the crisis for everybody. What we need is really a European approach to the crisis management, and also a European crisis management. I mean, it's very difficult among 17 governments to handle a crisis. It would be better to have a European finance minister.
German people has the idea that countries in the south of Europe don't work as much and they don't deserve to be helped by German government and other wealthy countries like Holland, Finland or Austria?
No. Well, the sentiment is different. Of course, there are news about laziness, etc., etc. But I guess overall, the Germans want to be solidarious, want to help out. The point is that they want also to set conditions and want to make sure that it's not an endless help, but a help that really improves the situation, and that's why conditionality is important to most Germans. But when you ask the question in Germany, do you want Europe to stay together, most Germans say yes, and it is good that it is like this.
The European Council has accepted the idea of Angela Merkel and Sarkozy that all countries in Europe has to introduce on their laws, on their constitution, the control of public deficit, public debt. Do you agree with that idea?
The so-called fiscal pact is in itself not a bad idea. In a currency union, you need certain agreements on public policy in order to have a coordinated economic policy. The problem is that by introducing these laws now, all the countries will try to consolidate their budgets at the same time, and that will lead to a deepening of the crisis. It will reduce economic activity, and that will cause problems. And the second point is, what is missing in Europe are rules for tax policy, especially concerning the capital flight of the wealthy to Switzerland and other countries, and also laws that make sure that large corporations also pay taxes. And because these rules are missing, the fiscal pact will lead to reductions in social spending and will lead to an unfair distributional pattern of the crisis management. And I think it is important to control public deficits, but it's also necessary to make sure that the burden is shared in a just manner across society, which is to say those who are rich and can pay taxes should be asked to do so in order to reduce government's debt, and not only the poor when social spending is reduced.
Then how can we build, how can we preserve the welfare state in Europe?
Well, one thing is what I just mentioned. We need to have tax rules, for example, a common consolidated tax base for corporate taxation in Europe with minimal tax rates, and we need to fight together against tax evasion, because if you look at the tax income of the member states of the Eurozone, you find that in many cases it's difficult to tax returns on capital, and this is necessary to make sure that the governments have enough resources to pay their expenditures.
Angela Merkel, the government in Germany, doesn't want to hear about Eurobonus. But a lot of experts, even German entrepreneurs and industrials, agree with the idea of mutualizing the debt. Why is Angela Merkel so scared about Eurobonus?
Well, the idea of Eurobonds, which is the idea to have a shared responsibility for the debt, is not popular in Germany. 79% of Germans are against, so I think that's why Merkel fears it. The point is that today, with the ECB role in the crisis management, that is mutualized on the balance sheet of the ECB, and I think it would be better to do it with Eurobonds, especially in the version that has been proposed by experts here in Germany, which is linking it to a fund for excessive debt. So the introduction of Eurobonds in that case would be linked to a plan of how to reduce public debt in Europe.
You talk about ECB, what's that?
The European Central Bank.
Okay. Merkel and Sarkozy are talking now about creating jobs in Europe. In Germany exists what is called mini jobs, little jobs paid 1,400 euros or less. There are 7.5 million German people working with that salary. In Spain, people unemployed receive more than this. Do you think mini jobs can work in Spain or other countries than Germany?
There is a misunderstanding. The mini jobs are often additional jobs. So might be a husband who has a job and his wife who would have a mini job, and it's easier to arrange. And it's also a mechanism to fight black jobs, which are not declared. So, and some people receive unemployment recompensation, and in addition have a mini job. So it's not that they get 400 euros a month, and often they work part-time. The mini job system has problems because often normal jobs are split up in several small jobs, which is not good for the work environment and not good for the people concerned. But on the other hand, the mini job system can have a positive effect in private households, where it allows people to legalize household jobs, which formerly were illegal. So I don't know if they can work in Spain or not. That's something people in Spain have to decide upon. But we know that the current system of mini job in Germany has problems, and we want to reduce, as a Green Party, we want to reduce the use of mini jobs.
German figures say that there is little unemployment in your country, in Germany, but there is a lot of people working for low salaries. There is exactly this, the unemployment, the figures of unemployment in Germany.
Well, unemployment is low in Germany, lower than last year's, and is because we benefit at that moment from the crisis, which is a bizarre effect. But still, there is a large sector of relatively low-paid jobs, and that is why the Green Party, we want to introduce a legal minimum wage of €8.50 in order to make sure that the pressure on wages is not too strong, but that there is a legal minimum.
Another thing, for a German politician to say in public that the German government has to aid the European countries is an electoral risk. You lose voters if you say something like that.
Yeah, I understand the point. Yes, there is a risk, but in the long run, it is better for Germany to help now in a good manner than to postpone the problems into the future. And this is what happens right now with the crisis management of Angela Merkel. So I think people also value and estimate honesty, and to say honestly that there will be a burden for the German taxpayer, but it is in our interest to carry that burden because we need Europe to go ahead economically and politically. There you can also find people who support that idea.
How do you think German media, the mass communication, the newspapers, the TV, explains the problems of South European countries? That peaks, they say, do they help to find a solution, or do they adopt nationalist positions?
There is not really a very strong tendency towards national positions. There are some newspapers like Bild, tabloid. They focus more on that variant, but I think that German media focus too much on public debt, and the crisis is not only about public debt, it's also about private debt. Many households, also in Spain, if I'm not mistaken, have very large debt loads to carry, also enterprises and banks. And so we have to look at the overall debt problem, and there is a bias in the media coverage. Most focus only on the government debt, and this is economically not correct.
Do you believe that the relationship between people in Greece, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and people in Germany or Holland can be deteriorate for that situation? We have seen those days.
Yeah, there is a risk that the friendship between the European people is in a difficult situation right now, and I have felt this when I was in Spain a couple of months ago, that people are more and more critical towards Germany. I think this is now what we politically have to do. We have to try to convince people that we have to go together in Europe, and that solidarity is in our own self-interest. But of course, that means also that solidarity is not a one-way road. For example, we need the Irish to accept that we need a common corporate tax law in the European Union, and they have to give up their special status on the corporate tax law. And then we also need to agree on other issues so that we bring about a good solution for everybody in the European Union for the future.
And we'll see soon a Europe where these taxes in Ireland or Barcelona, the laboral laws, the salaries, the prices, are the same in every country, in every city in Europe?
We don't need to have the taxes and the labor laws and everything at the same level, but we need to make sure that it's not possible to circumvent the tax laws. It's necessary to make sure that the development of prices and salaries is such that the Eurozone doesn't come into a new stress. The disequilibrium between the economies have to be reduced, because that's behind the debt problem, is the imbalances in the economic development of Germany and Holland on the one side, and Greece, Spain, Italy on the other side. And this is important to have agreements that make sure that these imbalances do not put the currency union into risk again.
Last question. Today in the European Parliament they are discussing the Green Book of Eurobonus. Do you believe that some kind of Eurobonus can be accepted in a future not very long?
I hope so. And there are good proposals on the table for that. but I fear that our right-wing government will not accept this idea. And what happens now is that with the European Central Bank helping the banks, there is a mutualization of debt in the same way that we would have it with Eurobonds, but it's not transparent, and it's not, and the social balance is not correct. So it would be better for us to go for the Eurobond solution than for the current solution.
Till when do you think this crisis will last?
We will certainly, in the case of Greece, need more than 10 years to stabilize the economy. And most financial crises in history have lasted 8 or 9 years, so there's still many years before us, and therefore it is very important to find good solutions now, because the worse the crisis management, the longer the crisis will last.
And will people have patience enough or accept so much years in that way?
I hope, and the point is, people will only have patience if they see that things move in the right directions, and that there is a possibility for things to improve. And we need more transparency in the political decision making and more public debate on the correct way to get out of this crisis. The current crisis management makes it very difficult for people to go along, because it's not clear, and it has also a lack of democratic control, because many things are discussed behind closed doors without the necessary control by the European Parliament, and that makes people feel uneasy about does not really solve the crisis, but in many aspects deepens the crisis and will lead to a higher cost for taxpayer than necessary, and also to an uneven distribution of the burden of this crisis.
Do you think Angela Merkel or the CDU politic helps or harms, goes against countries?
You need to go together. It's a European crisis, and we need a European solution for that. And the fact that each of the crisis summits in Brussels is again a quarreling between the heads of states, and each government tries to make the best for its own country, that brings about a higher cost of the crisis for everybody. What we need is really a European approach to the crisis management, and also a European crisis management. I mean, it's very difficult among 17 governments to handle a crisis. It would be better to have a European finance minister.
German people has the idea that countries in the south of Europe don't work as much, and they don't, like Greece, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Spain.
I don't think it actually goes against the countries you name, but the approach is looking first at the national interest, which is also true for other heads of government or heads of state in Europe. The problem is, in a crisis of that kind, in a currency union,
What's your opinion about the politic of Angela Merkel in the European economic crisis?
The crisis management, which is led by Angela Merkel and Nicolas Sarkozy,